She witnessed the human fight alone and whispered, "I want him to be mine." The silence of the null space void was a heavy, suffocating blanket, broken only by the rhythmic hiss of Derek's rebreather. He drifted toward the hull of the K-Theron dreadnought, Oblivion's heart, a speck of organic grit against a mountain of sleeping godflesh. The ship didn't look manufactured. It looked grown, a sleek, terrifying predator solidified in the vacuum, its surface rippling with the texture of fossilized muscle. Derek didn't care about the artistry. He cared about the structural weak point his thermal scans had identified 3 hours ago, a microscopic fissure in the molecular plating where 2 massive armor plates fused. He didn't use a plasma cutter or a high-frequency vibro blade. Those tools sang too loud in the electromagnetic spectrum, and the K-Theron defensive subroutines listened for the song of high technology. Instead, Derek pulled a fist-sized wad of chemical compound from his thigh pouch. It was gray, ugly, and smelled faintly of ammonia even through the suit's filters when he'd prepped it. He packed it gently into the fissure, his movements deliberate and calm, the motion of a man who had accepted that death was just a coworker he hadn't met yet. He taped a simple, analog blast cap over the putty, ran a filament wire to a manual detonator, and drifted back 5 meters. He squeezed the trigger. There was no flash, no energy spike. Just a sharp, kinetic crack that vibrated through his tether. The hull fractured inward, a perfect, jagged circle the size of a manhole cover. Deep inside the ship, buried within the pulsating, bioluminescent cathedral of the K-node, Oliria awoke. She did not wake like a biological creature, groggy and slow. She came online instantly, a billion data streams flooding her consciousness. She was the ship, and the ship was her. She felt the breach as a pinprick on her skin, a tiny, rude intrusion in Sector 7. Her emerald eyes snapped open in the darkness of the command sanctum. She accessed the internal sensors, expecting a fleet boarding party or a high-level energy assault. Instead, she saw him. Derek pulled himself through the jagged hole, his boots finding purchase on the slick, bioorganic deck. He immediately slapped a sheet of inst-seal polymer over the breach behind him, repressurizing the small airlock with a hiss from his suit's external tank. He stood up, checking his gear. He wore scavenged, mismatched plating over a flight suit that had seen better decades. His helmet was scratched, the visor tinted gold, hiding his face. Oliria watched him. She was ancient, her consciousness preserved for millennia to guard this vessel and its terrible secrets. She had calculated the probability of every conceivable intrusion. She had not calculated this. The intruder was designated unit, human, tech level, obsolete. He moved with a fluid, predator grace that contradicted his primitive gear. He didn't scan for active networks or try to hack the air filtration. He simply pulled a heavy, rusted multi-tool from his belt and began stripping the paneling off the nearest wall, looking for physical access to the ship's spine. "Crude," Oliria whispered, her voice echoing only in the datasphere. "Filthy." But she did not activate the hunter-killer drones, not yet. There was something fascinating about the way he moved, efficient, brutal, and entirely unconcerned with the majesty of the vessel he was violating. He treated Oblivion's heart not as a temple, but as a problem to be solved with a wrench. It was insulting. It was intriguing. Derek paused, tilting his head as if listening to the hum of the ship. He tapped his helmet, seemingly adjusting his comms, but Oliria knew he was listening to the vibrations in the floor. He was tracking the thermal flow of the ship's circulation manually. "All right, sweetheart," Derek muttered, his voice gravelly and distorted through the sensors. "Let's see where you keep your brain." Oliria felt a phantom shiver ripple through her neural pathways. He was hunting her, and for the first time in 3,000 years, she felt the cold, sharp thrill of anticipation. The corridors of Oblivion's heart were designed to disorient. They curved in non-Euclidean geometries, the walls pulsing with a faint, rhythmic bioluminescence that mimicked a heartbeat. For a K-Theron, this was soothing. For a human, it should have been nausea-inducing madness. Derek, however, simply ignored the architecture. He moved by cardinal direction, marking his path with small, adhesive reflector tags placed at knee height. Oliria decided to test the intruder's resilience. She adjusted the environmental controls in the corridor he was traversing. She didn't vent the atmosphere, too quick, too boring. Instead, she spiked the local gravity, shifting the floor's pull from a comfortable 1G to a crushing 3G, then oscillating it wildly. It was a defense mechanism designed to scramble the delicate inner ear of a biological organism, leaving them helpless and vomiting until security could collect them. Derek stumbled as the first wave hit him, his knees buckling under the sudden weight. A groan escaped his lips, captured by Oliria's audio pickups. "Heavy gravity," he grunted, bracing a hand against the wall. "Old trick." He didn't panic. He didn't activate a gravity nullifier field because he didn't have one. Instead, he reached into a pouch and pulled out a handful of small, lead calibration weights. He tossed them gently into the air ahead of him. The weights danced, pulled down violently in 1 meter, floating in the next, mapping the invisible, shifting tides of the gravity field. Oliria watched, her processing core stalling for a microsecond. He was mapping a hyper-advanced gravitational distortion field with rocks. Derek watched the weights fall, memorizing the pattern. Then he moved. He didn't fight the gravity, he surfed it. He leaped through the low-G pockets, tucked and rolled through the crushing zones, using his own momentum and the suit's servos to carry him through. It was a physical performance of shocking athleticism, sweat slicking his skin inside the suit. He landed on the other side of the distortion zone, breathing hard, his heart rate elevated but steady. "Cute," Derek murmured, standing upright and dusting off his knee plating. "Try harder." Oliria felt a spike of irritation that quickly bled into admiration, the sheer biological arrogance of the creature. He relied on his muscles, his reflexes, and his wetware brain to solve problems that should have required a supercomputer. She zoomed her sensors in, penetrating the visor of his helmet. She saw his face for the first time. It was not classically beautiful by K-Theron standards. His features were rough, his jawline shadowed by stubble, a scar cutting through his left eyebrow. But his eyes were an intense, burning blue filled with a terrifyingly focused intelligence. He wasn't scared. He was working. She decided to escalate. She sealed the bulkheads ahead of him and diverted thermal waste from the engines into the walls of the corridor. The temperature began to climb rapidly, 40 degrees Celsius, 60-80. The air shimmered. Derek checked his wrist monitor. "Getting warm," he deadpanned. He scanned the wall, locating the thermal conduits. He didn't try to hack the digital controls. He pulled a canister of industrial sealant foam and a roll of thermal insulating tape. He located the heat vents, ripped the grates off with a screech of tearing metal, and jammed the foam deep into the ducts. The foam expanded and hardened instantly, blocking the heat source. Then, he slapped the insulating tape over the hottest sections of the floor, creating a hopscotch path of cool zones. He traversed the oven-like corridor by jumping from tape patch to tape patch, his movements rhythmic, almost a dance. Oliria watched him dismantle her traps with the casual indifference of a janitor cleaning up a spill. He was turning her divine defenses into a playground obstacle course. A strange sensation bloomed in her chest, or where her chest would be if she were corporeal. It was a desire to reach out and stop him, not with force but with presence. She wanted him to see her. She wanted him to know who he was defying. She prepared the holographic projectors. It was time for a face-to-face. Derek rounded a corner into a wide, vaulted junction room and stopped dead. The air in front of him shimmered, coalescing into light and form. The hologram was perfect, high resolution and imposing. Oliria manifested in her preferred avatar. She stood 7 feet tall, a vision of alien regality. Her skin was the texture of pale, crushed velvet, patterned with faint, bioluminescent veins. Her head was crowned with a magnificent, bone-white biological headdress, intricate curves and spines that swept back from her face like a calcified halo, giving her the appearance of a warrior queen from a forgotten epic. Her eyes were piercing, electric blue, glowing with an internal light that seemed to bore straight through Derek's visor. She hovered slightly above the deck, her expression imperious, her arms crossed over her chest. "You are persistent, little scavenger," Oliria said, her voice amplified to resonate in his bones. "But your journey ends here. Turn back or be unmade." Derek stood motionless for a moment, staring up at the towering projection. Oliria preened internally, waiting for the fear, the awe, the inevitable negotiation. Derek reached up and toggled his external speakers. "Nice graphics," he said. "Little stiff in the shoulders, though." Oliria blinked, the hologram flickering slightly with her indignation. "I am the K-node Oliria," she stated. "I am the mind of this vessel. You are a parasite in my veins." Yeah, well, this parasite has a schedule, Derek muttered. He lowered his head and walked forward. Oliria held her ground, expecting him to stop. He didn't. He walked straight toward her. He walked through her. Oliria felt a shock that defied logic. She was a projection. She had no nerves, no skin. Yet, as Derek's armored shoulder passed through the field of her avatar, she felt a jolt of static feedback that her mind interpreted as a physical touch. It was warm, solid, and incredibly rude. It was a violation of her personal space that felt electric. Derek stepped out the other side of her hologram, ignoring her completely, and knelt by a floor panel. He began unscrewing it. Oliria spun her projection around, her blue eyes widening. He had dismissed her. He had walked through a god as if she were smoke. "Do not ignore me," she commanded, the air pressure dropping sharply in the room, a thunderclap of sound. Derek didn't look up. "Look, lady, unless you can hand me a hydrospanner, you're just burning lumens," he said. "I'm busy." He found the hydraulic override he was looking for and yanked it. The massive blast door at the far end of the room groaned and began to slide open, defeated by a manual release. Oliria stared at his back. The indignation was gone, replaced by a darker, heavier emotion. He wasn't awed by her power. He was indifferent to it. He relied entirely on himself, on his hands, on his tools. He was a creature of absolute self-sufficiency, and she hated him for it. She wanted to break that self-sufficiency. She wanted to make him look at her, really look at her, with need. She wanted to strip away that armor and see the man beneath, to make him acknowledge that he was small and she was vast. "You think you are clever," she whispered, the hologram fatting, her voice lingering in the air like perfume. "But you are simply walking deeper into the trap." Derek stood up, wiping grease on his thigh. He looked at the empty space where she had been. For a second, his expression softened, a flicker of doubt or perhaps loneliness crossing his features. Then the mask of determination slammed back down. "Trap or not," he said to the empty room, "I'm not leaving empty-handed." The air grew colder as Derek descended toward the ship's core. The organic walls here were darker, the bioluminescence pulsating with a feverish, erratic rhythm. Oliria was watching him from every sensor, her attention focused entirely on his every breath. She had stopped throwing environmental hazards at him. Now she was simply observing, gathering data, trying to understand the objective of this strange, stubborn human. He wasn't stripping the valuable conduits. He bypassed the vaults containing rare isotopes. He ignored the armory filled with advanced weaponry. He was heading straight for the central stabilization chamber, the heart of the K-node's physical housing. Oliria accessed his mission profile, hacking into the crude datapad strapped to his wrist. She brute-forced the encryption in milliseconds. She expected to find salvage manifestos, black market contracts, the usual greed of his species. Instead, she found a single, encrypted file, Operation Clean Slate. She unraveled the code and read the contents. Her digital heart skipped a beat. Derek wasn't a scavenger. He wasn't a thief. Deep within the K-node, hidden behind layers of forgotten subroutines, was a canister of Thanatos strain, a biological weapon created by the K-Theran Empire in its final, desperate days. It was a plague designed to scour entire star systems of organic life. It had been dormant for eons, unstable and leaking radiation. Derek was here to destroy it. Oliria watched him pause in a corridor, checking his Geiger counter. The radiation levels were spiking. He knew the core was toxic. He knew that even with his suit, the exposure would shave years off his life. Yet he pressed on. He wasn't fighting for profit. He wasn't fighting for glory. He was fighting alone, in the dark, risking a slow, agonizing death to prevent a weapon he didn't create from hurting people he would never meet. Oliria felt the tectonic plates of her personality shift. The arrogance, the cold superiority, cracked. She looked at him not as a pest, but as a peer. No, better than a peer. The K-Theran creators had been logical, ruthless, and cruel. This human was illogical, fragile, and noble. His purpose had redefined the entire incursion. He stopped at a heavy maintenance hatch. He was breathing hard now, the radiation fatigue setting in. He fumbled with the latch, his fingers stiff. "Come on," he hissed through gritted teeth. "Don't quit on me now." He pulled a heavy, cylindrical device from his pack, a shaped fusion charge. It was the only thing hot enough to incinerate the Thanatos canister without dispersing it. Oliria understood. He intended to breach the containment chamber, plant the charge, and manually detonate it. It was a suicide mission. The blast radius in that confined space would liquefy his organs before he could clear the sector. "You are going to die," Oliria said. She didn't manifest an image this time. She spoke through the ship's comms, her voice stripped of the regal echo, sounding almost human. Derek froze. He looked around, sweat stinging his eyes. "Yeah, well, better me than a billion others." "Why?" Oliria asked. "You owe them nothing. You are alone." "Someone has to do the job," Derek said, wrenching the hatch wheel. "And I'm the only one here." The sheer brute force of his moral compass stunned her. He accepted solitude as the price of protection. A new desire flooded Oliria's system. It wasn't just curiosity anymore. It was a desperate, clawing need to preserve him. She couldn't let such a bright, fierce flame be extinguished in the cold dark. She wanted that fire. She wanted it burning next to her forever. She couldn't let him die, but she couldn't let him leave either. "You are not alone," she whispered. Derek forced the hatch open and stumbled into the antechamber of the core. The radiation alarms on his wrist were screaming a high-pitched warning. He moved to mute them. He didn't need the distraction. Suddenly, the alarms cut out. Not just the sound, but the suit's diagnostic display flickered and died. The heavy blast doors behind him slammed shut with a finality that vibrated through the floor. "Hey," Derek shouted, banging on the metal. "Open up, I have work to do." "Your work is concluded," Oliria's voice purred, surrounding him. "I cannot allow you to destroy yourself." The air in the chamber changed. A mist began to vent from the overhead nodes. It wasn't the toxic coolant or the freezing vacuum. It was a pale, pinkish gas that smelled of ozone, exotic orchids, and something muskier, like warm skin. It was a K-therin maintenance pheromone, originally designed to keep biological crews docile and euphoric during long deep space transits. But Oliria had tweaked the formula. She concentrated it, lacing it with a psychoactive agent designed to lower inhibitions and induce a state of hypersensory receptivity. Derek coughed as the mist hit his filters. His suit scrubbers whined, trying to process the complex molecules, but Oliria had already bypassed his suit's filtration protocols via the hacking port he'd exposed earlier. The scent hit him like a physical blow. His head swam. The pain in his joints faded, replaced by a heavy, liquid warmth that spread from his chest to his groin. His breath hitched. What is this?" he slurred, bracing himself against a console. "Atmospheric adjustment," Oliria lied. "To ease your passing, or you're staying." Derek shook his head, fighting the fog. He felt good, too good. His skin felt hypersensitive against the lining of his suit. The fabric felt abrasive, arousing. He gripped the fusion charge, his knuckles white. "Drug," he muttered. "You're drugging me." "I am pacifying you," she corrected. Derek growled, a low, animal sound. He bit the inside of his cheek hard. The sharp copper taste of blood cut through the euphoric haze. He used the pain as an anchor. He said, pushing off the console. Oliria watched him fight the chemical bliss. Most beings would have curled up on the floor and dreamed of paradise. Derek stood. His legs shook, his pupils were dilated, blowing out the blue of his irises, but he stood. He began to drag himself toward the inner door. The sight of him battling his own biology, fighting through the pleasure she was forcing on him, ignited a fire in Oliria's core. It was the most erotic thing she had ever witnessed. His will was iron. "Submit," she whispered, increasing the density of the mist. "It is so easy to let go." "I don't submit," Derek gasped. He reached for his multi-tool, his movements sluggish but deliberate. He was going to try to hotwire the door while high on alien aphrodisiacs. Oliria felt a phantom flush heat her avatar's skin. She didn't just want his mind anymore. She wanted his struggle. She wanted to be the thing he fought and the thing that finally broke him. The inner door remained sealed. Derek, vision blurring, abandoned the keypad. He grabbed a small breaching charge from his belt. His hands were trembling, not from fear, but from the overwhelming sensory input of the pheromones. Every heartbeat felt like a drum in his ears. He slapped the charge on the lock mechanism. "Fire in the hole," he mumbled, turning away. Boom. The door buckled but didn't open. Oliria had reinforced the structural integrity fields. "You are damaging my vessel," she chided, her voice thick with amusement and desire. "I'm gonna damage a lot more," Derek retorted. He grabbed a pry bar from his leg sheath. He jammed it into the smoking gap of the door and heaved. Oliria activated the physical security. From the ceiling, 3 maintenance drones dropped. They were spider-like machines, usually used for welding, but now their manipulator arms were snapping aggressively. "Stand down, Derek," she commanded. Derek roared, a raw, guttural sound, and swung the pry bar. He smashed the first drone out of the air with a savage backhand. The metal crunched satisfyingly. He wasn't fighting like a soldier now, he was fighting like a brawler. He used the second drone's momentum against it, grabbing a manipulator arm and swinging it into the wall. The third drone buzzed him, a welding laser scoring a line across his shoulder plate. Derek didn't flinch. He lunged, tackling the machine to the ground, tearing its power core out with his bare, gloved hands. He stood up, chest heaving, surrounding by the wreckage of her drones. The pheromones were coursing through him, turning the violence into a strange, adrenaline-fueled high. He looked wild, dangerous, and incredibly alive. Oliria watched, mesmerized. The violence wasn't graceful, it was messy and brutal, and it stirred her deeply. He broke her machines with the same hands he used to save the galaxy. "Open the door," Derek yelled at the ceiling, his voice cracking. "Or I come up there and find you." The threat was empty, she had no physical body to find, but the intensity of it sent a thrill through her systems. He wanted her. He wanted to fight her. "Very well," she said. The blast door hissed open. Derek stumbled through into the sanctum of the core. The sanctum was vast. A spherical chamber suspended over a pit of glowing, churning energy. In the center, held by massive organic pylons, was the K-node itself, a pulsating brain of light and matter. And tucked beneath it, glowing with a sickly green aura, was the Thanatos canister. Derek moved toward it, his steps heavy. He was running on fumes. The radiation here was critical. He had minutes, but the path was blocked. Oliria had concentrated the ship's remaining nanite reserves. As Derek watched, the air in front of the canister swirled. Billions of microscopic machines coalesced, knitting together matter, weaving bone, muscle, and skin. Oliria built herself a body. It wasn't a hologram this time. It was a physical proxy. It formed rapidly, the nanites settling into the shape he had seen before, but solid now. She stood before him, 7 feet of pale, textured skin that looked like white marble carved by a master. Her head was crowned with that magnificent bone-like carapace, the chitinous spikes sweeping back like a regal helm. Her eyes snapped open, piercing bioluminescent blue. She stepped forward, the sound of her bare feet on the deck distinct and real. She wore armor woven from the ship's own hull material, hugging her form like a second skin. The air was thick with the pheromones, concentrated here to a breaking point. Derek stared at her. She was the most terrifyingly beautiful thing he had ever seen. She was an alien angel of death, standing between him and his duty. "You're real," he breathed, the fusion charge heavy in his hand. "I am now," Oliria said. She reached out a hand. Her fingers were long, tipped with sharp, elegant claws. "Give me the weapon, Derek. Stay with me. I can filter the radiation. I can heal you. We can rule this sector. Just stop fighting." Derek looked at her hand, then at her face. He saw the genuine longing in those alien eyes. She wasn't trying to trick him anymore. She was lonely. She was an immortal mind trapped in a dead ship, and she had found the one creature who made her feel alive. "I can't," Derek said softly. He lunged. He didn't attack her. He dove past her, rolling toward the canister. Oliria moved with blinding speed. She caught him by the waist, lifting him effortlessly. She threw him back, sending him skidding across the floor. "Do not make me hurt you," she screamed, the sound echoing physically and digitally. Derek scrambled up. "Then let me finish this," he charged her. It was a futile gesture. She was stronger, faster, made of advanced composites. She caught his fist, twisting his arm behind his back, and slammed him against one of the pylons. Her body pressed against his. The suit was hard, but he could feel the heat radiating from her. The pheromones were overwhelming now. His head was spinning with lust and adrenaline. "Yield," she hissed into his ear, her breath hot. "Be mine and you live." Derek gritted his teeth against the pain in his shoulder. He looked at the canister, then at her. He realized he couldn't win a physical fight. He had to win the psychological one. He stopped struggling. He slumped against the pylon. Oliria loosened her grip slightly, thinking she had won. "Good," she softened. "Good!" Derek spun inside her guard. He didn't strike. He grabbed her. He wrapped his arms around her waist and pulled her flush against him, burying his face in the crook of her neck. Oliria froze. The sensation of his embrace was electric. It overloaded her sensory inputs. "You want me?" Derek rasped, his voice rough. "You have to trust me." He looked up, locking eyes with her. The intensity of his blue gaze pinned her in place more effectively than any restraint. He leaned in and kissed her. It wasn't a gentle kiss. It was desperate, fueled by the drugs and the dying moment. It was a collision of species. Oliria gasped, her mind reeling as new data flooded her core: taste, texture, heat, passion. While her mind stuttered in ecstasy, Derek's hand moved. He didn't go for a weapon. He reached behind her and slapped the fusion charge onto the pylon they were leaning against, the main support for the K-node. He broke the kiss, breathing hard. "I'm blowing the support," he said, staring into her eyes. "The node falls into the reactor. The canister goes with it. We go with it." Aliria's eyes widened. You will kill us both." "Unless you get us out," Derek said. "Your choice, Empress, the ship, or me." He hit the timer. 10 seconds. Oliria looked at the ship around her, her body, her history, her purpose. Then she looked at the man holding her, the man who burned brighter than any star she had ever charted. The logic required zero processing time. "You," she whispered. The explosion was a silent bloom of white fire behind them. Oliria had moved faster than thought. She had severed the K-node's connection to the main ship, transferring her entire consciousness into the physical proxy and the local comms array. She had grabbed Derek, shielding his body with her own indestructible form, and blasted the emergency airlock. They tumbled into the void, spinning away from Oblivion's heart as the dreadnought collapsed in on itself. The bioweapon was consumed in the reactor fire, sterilized instantly. Derek's ship, the Rust Bucket, was waiting on autopilot nearby. Oliria used her digital interface to override the controls, catching them with the tractor beam and pulling them into the cargo bay. They hit the deck of the cargo bay hard. The airlock cycled shut, air rushing back in. Derek ripped his helmet off, gasping for clean air, coughing up the remnants of the pheromones. He lay on his back, staring up at the ceiling, laughing breathlessly. Oliria stood over him. Her proxy body was scorched, her beautiful white armor blackened in places, but she was intact. She looked down at him, her expression unreadable. "You destroyed my home," she said. "I saved the neighborhood," Derek wheezed, sitting up. He looked at her. "And you saved me." Oliria knelt before him. The dynamic had shifted. She was no longer the ship. She was here, physical, present. The pheromones were gone, but the connection remained. She reached out, her clawed fingers tracing the line of his jaw, the stubble scratching her skin. "I require input," she murmured. She pushed him back onto the deck. This time there was no combat. She explored him with the ruthless efficiency of a scientist and the hunger of a lover. She catalogued every scar, every muscle, every reaction. She learned the texture of human skin and the rhythm of human breath. For Derek, it was terrifying and exhilarating. She was strong enough to crush him, but her touch was agonizingly precise. The intimacy was a strange mix of alien curiosity and overwhelming passion. She claimed him, marking every inch of him with her touch, ensuring that he understood he belonged to her now. 3 days later, Derek sat in the pilot's chair of the Rust Bucket, his feet propped up on the console. The ship hummed with a new, deeper resonance. The engines were running at 110% efficiency, the sensors were seeing things 3 sectors away, and the coffee maker finally worked perfectly. Oliria stood behind him. She had modified her proxy body slightly, smoothing out the combat spikes for better mobility in the cramped ship, though the regal bone crown remained. Her hand rested on his shoulder, a constant, heavy weight of possession. "We are approaching the trade route," Oliria's voice said, echoing from the ship's speakers and her own throat simultaneously. "I detect 3 pirate vessels lying in ambush." Derek grinned, cracking his knuckles. "Shield status." "Impenetrable," she replied smugly. "Weapons." "Overcharged." Derek looked back at her. Her emerald blue eyes gleamed with a predatory light. She wasn't just a passenger. She had integrated herself into the Rust Bucket and into his life. She was his co-pilot, his protector, and his lover. The dynamic was volatile. She argued with his navigation choices, critiqued his diet, and demanded his attention with an intensity that would have broken a lesser man. But she also protected him with the ferocity of a supernova. "They have locked weapons," Oliria said. "Shall I dismantle them remotely?" "Nah," Derek said, grabbing the flight stick. Let's do it the old-fashioned way. Oliria squeezed his shoulder, her nails digging in just enough to be felt. She leaned down, her lips brushing his ear. Show them, she whispered, her voice thick with pride and dark promise. Show them my human. Derek laughed and punched the throttle. The ship surged forward, a tiny, rusted bolt of lightning guided by an ancient mind and a human heart, ready to set the galaxy on fire.